is definitely time for us to get out of the city. So I'm going to take you up to the high country, and let me tell you why. Have you ever seen a photograph with so much depth you felt like you could just walk right into it? As if you were a bird and you could just fly into the scene, you could just keep going forever? Have you ever wondered how you could make photographs with that same result? On this trip and in this video, my goal is to practice my techniques to create depth, as much depth as I can in my photographs. So I'm hoping to be able to teach you those while you're coming along with me. Getting photographs with that kind of depth is not easy, and I'm not guaranteed that I'll be successful with that this weekend, although I'm going to try. But for me, the first thing that I start with to get photographs with a lot of depth is to get as high as I possibly can. So I'll be going up to that summit there at nearly 13,000 feet to spend the weekend and take photographs from the top. Hey there, this is Creation Images, where I share my in-the-field landscape photography, the skills I've learned over 20 years of hiking and backpacking in the wilderness, as well as the insights and the inspirations that I've received along the way. If you're new here, go ahead and click on the subscribe button and ring the bell below so that you can receive notification every time I come up with a new adventure. Anyway, I hope this video is helpful to you, and I really appreciate you being here, so thanks for watching. I don't know if I'll be successful with capturing an image that gets that kind of depth or not, but I will share with you my top 6 strategies that I will be using to make my best effort at that while we're up there on the summit of Mount Jasper. And then I'll take the image home, load up in Photoshop, and talk a little bit more about those 6 strategies in depth. So my first job is to get up past those snowfields there, work my way around that bench, and then Mount Jasper proper is back beyond in the basin there that you can't see just yet. Oh yeah, I also wanted to mention at the end of this video, I'm gonna have a bonus, and I'll be sharing the 3 online tools that I use to do the planning for this kind of big, grand landscape photo. So be sure to stick around to the end of the video so you can check that out as well. I just stumbled on the unfortunate remains of this plane crash. I don't know the story behind it at all, but I can't imagine that it ended well. Looks like that's the pilot seat up front. Home sweet home. All right, so let's just jump right into the first thing that you need to be able to capture landscape photos with a lot of depth. You got to get high. No, of course I didn't mean it that way. What I mean is you got to find a nice high vantage point so that you can capture all the other elements that you need to be able to give that perception of depth. Things like lots of different layers and
a good foreground and a background and a midground, you need to provide elements that give a sense of scale and a sense of atmosphere. And you don't have to bivvy at 13,000 feet like we are tonight to be able to do that. You do just need to capture, or you do need to find a nice place that gives you a good vantage point though. So I'll talk more about those things later on tonight when I set up my sunset composition. But for now, number one, get up high.
This is a handheld daylight scene, but there's an awful lot of depth in this photo, so I thought it'd be worth talking about. The first thing is the layers that we have here. We got the foreground here that's going to be sharp, the midground, which is the lakes, and this big mountain here. And in the background, we've got different layers of light. We've got this layer here, the mountain with light, and then the mountains in the background with light, and then some interest up in the clouds, which adds another layer to the whole scene. So we've got lots of different layers in this image, and we don't have things that are, we're very intentional about what is overlapping one layer or another layer. So this mountain, I intentionally wanted to put it so it broke the horizon, which gives it a lot of mass. It just gives it a lot of scale. It's really big. And then these rocks provide a little scale because, you know, these rocks, they're pretty big here in the foreground, and all these mountains in the background are built by that same rock. So that gives it some scale as well. But if I had moved my composition back a little bit like this, where those lakes are partially covered up, that wouldn't have worked at all. So it's really important to make sure that I didn't have these rocks interfere with the lakes at all. So it's really important to not have those kind of distractions. And then, so we have scale here, and then we also have atmosphere, because everything here is going to be really sharp, really contrasted. And as you go further through the scene, you can see back there, it starts to get a little fuzzy, and it's not going to be nearly as contrasted. It starts to lose its definition a little bit, which makes it give that perception of being really far away, and it gives it that kind of depth. So again, while this is just a daylight scene, I think it really provides an idea of what you want when you're looking for a composition that has a lot of depth. So unfortunately, I botched my sunset photo, so I came back to this location for sunrise and wanted to share again a little more detail on the 6 strategies that you can use to make your photos have more depth. Again, we talked about the very first one, which is you want to get to a nice high vantage. It's not always high that you need, but you do need to have a vantage point that might be low looking up or high looking down, but either way, you need to have layers in your photo that provide a good foreground, like we have here along this line in the rocks. We want to have a good midground here with the lakes, and we want to have a background back here to provide that depth in a photograph. So we want to have your layers, and that would be the second point, or the second strategy, is to have layers in your photo. The other thing you're going to want to have is intentional overlapping of your layers. So in general, you want to avoid having layers overlap. And in this case, you know, we talked about earlier that you don't want the rocks overlap onto the lakes here. But I was intentional about having this mountain overlap. And you can see here, having this mountain overlap the horizon, because I wanted it to have a lot of scale and a lot of mass. In this particular photo, I was a little bummed that this point here was so close to the horizon, or that other layer in the background, and that point was so close to the other layer in the background. But overall, that's not really that big of a deal. But be very intentional about whether or not layers overlap. And in general, you want to avoid having layers that overlap. So that would be point number 3. Do not have overlapping layers. Point number 4 is you want to provide scale in your photographs. So we talked in the field about how these rocks and the grasses here are in contrast with all the rocks and the grasses in the background. And we know that these are the same rock and grass that we have here in the foreground that seem so big, and they're so tiny in the background. So that provides scale. You can use trees, you can use people, anything that is recognizable
People know what the size is for that particular object in the foreground or the midground or the background, gives them a sense of scale. And then something else I hadn't mentioned in the out in the field is alternating light and shadow. And so having side light is really important for that. Here we have side light coming in here from the sunrise, and it provides all this texture here in the rocks, and that gives it a lot of depth, just a lot of texture. But the side light also is providing this alternating dark and light. So we have all this dark area in the foreground, this light area here, and then that alternates again. Here it's dark, here it's dark, here it's dark, here it's right in here it's dark, back here it's dark. So having those alternating dark and light areas provides a lot of sense of scale, or a lot of depth to your photo. And the last thing is giving atmosphere for your photographs. You don't always want everything in your photo to be super sharp. So in this case, we have very sharp rocks here in the foreground. You've got a lot of sharp detail here along in the mountain. But back here, you don't have any detail. This is all hazy in the background. Hazy here. These mountains back here are almost not discernible between them and the clouds in the background. So having sharp objects versus hazy objects give a lot of depth to photographs as well. So those are the 6 strategies that I use to provide depth in my photographs.
Wow, what an incredible place to just hang out and take photos. I got that one shot last night that I think turned out pretty good. I'm really hoping it did anyway. And got up this morning and got a few more good shots this morning. But anyway, I really hope that this video was helpful. And I definitely don't want to forget my bonus information. So little bonus tips are the 3 tools that I use to help plan trips like this. That's Photographer's Ephemeris, Google Earth, and the National Weather Service. Now, I think Photographer's Ephemeris does a better job than Google Earth to show kind of the lay of the light on the land, and it'll give you specific times for the moon and the sun and the Milky Way and all that good stuff. Then Google Earth gives you just a really good overview of the land, so you can kind of plan things out on a bigger scale. And then the National Weather Service has a section at the bottom that'll actually show you the percentage of cloud cover. That way you can find the sweet spot for clouds. Not too many, but enough that you can have some good atmosphere and some good light, some good reflected light. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, I certainly hope that you would consider subscribing to it, and thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.